miles breaking and entering to be here with you today, but it's all good. The first piece was Bach's Fugue in G minor, which is nicknamed The Little. There was a great fugue in G minor as well, which was originally written for pipe organ, obviously not concert band, but was adapted for concert band. And this particular adaptation for concert band is brand new. It was done during COVID when a lot of bands went to flexible instrumentation, which means that we may not have 35, 40 people on stage like we need, so they created music that could be played by different numbers of people, right? They simplified things down to 4 or 5 voices. Well, fugues are already simplified down to 4 or 5 voices. It's just those 4 or 5 voices do very complicated things. So it made sense for this to be done in a flexible band arrangement. I think it worked really well. I'm very proud of them for being able to pull this off, and I think Bach would think it was very cool, even though Bach, of course, never heard a saxophone or a drum, much to his great loss. Before we go on to our next piece, one of our bass clarinets, Luke Ozimek, it is his birthday. He is 21 today. He doesn't want us to know that. So we're going to play Happy Birthday for Luke as only the MCC band can. Our next piece is something we played on our Halloween concert. And if you weren't there, we every year, the Sunday before Halloween, do a joint Halloween concert with the Crystal Lake Community Band. And this year, one of the pieces we played, it's called Dybbuk Variations, by a composer named Ken Snook, who is the retired band director from Lake Park High School and is somewhat legendary in this area as a band arranger and a band director. A dybbuk, as some of you may know, is a spirit where something has gone wrong in the transition to the afterlife. Either there's been some great sin or some unfinished business or something, and the dybbuk can't move on correctly. And so what the dybbuk does is it inhabits different people, trying to find a place where it can fit in, right? It goes into different bodies trying to fit in because it has nowhere to be. So this particular piece of music was written for the 50th anniversary of the school district where Ken Snook was teaching. And he had this idea, well, what if our fight song was a dybbuk? What if something went wrong and our fight song became a restless soul and just inhabited other songs, just inhabited other genres and types of music, trying to find its way around? So that's what happens in here. You'll hear little snippets of the fight song, and then you'll hear this fight song trying to be different things. This is Dybbuk Variations. gym. The next piece is called Persist, and it is dedicated to the memory of Marcia Zaputo, who was a band director, a middle school band director in Texas, and was quite, I don't want to say instrumental, that's a bad word, in kind of shaping, talking about bands, in kind of shaping our idea of Texas bands. And if you're familiar, the Texas school bands have a great reputation. There is a story that one of her middle school band's recordings was put up against a professional group's recording of Holst's First Suite, and several people said, oh, that's the professional group with her middle schoolers. So just an incredible group and an incredible person by all accounts. And this piece came about, she passed away in 2008. This piece was composed in 2020. But it came about because she had this idea of insistent persistence. The idea of you never stop, you always keep trying, right, come what may, you have to keep going. And this piece premiered in 2020 during the pandemic, and everybody assumed that it was persisting through the pandemic, and that worked out really nicely. But that's not why it was written. And that wasn't the persistence they were talking about. The persistence that B.J. Brooks, the composer, was talking about was the persistence of the elementary music teacher, and how important elementary music is, because we don't have this if we don't have that, right? We don't have the CSO if we don't have that. And those people give those kids everything, right? I don't have to know all the flute fingerings. It's a good thing because I don't know any of them. But I don't have to, right? If I taught middle school, I would have to know all that stuff, and also I would have to know how to work with middle schoolers, right? Which I have 2 middle schoolers at home, and they're a whole different species. So we have actually several elementary and middle school instructors in this band that are here with us today, so I do want to give them a round of applause right now. Because they put up with middle schoolers all day and then come put up with us in the evening, so that's pretty impressive. All right, this is Persist by B.J. Brooks. So the music nerds out there, why else would you be here, might be interested to know that that was in a rondo form, and that means that the first thing you hear keeps coming back over and over again. And that's the idea of persistent, right? It's a very beautiful melody, and one of the reasons I picked that piece for this semester was because, unlike a lot of lyrical pieces, it had percussion parts. And it's always a challenge for a band director to find ways to keep your percussionists busy so that they're not left to their own devices, even as adults. So the next piece was chosen for much the same reason. I looked at my roster at the beginning of the semester and I said, oh, I've got just a rockin' percussion section. So I got to give them stuff to do. And I ran across this piece that's called Homage to Bharat. And Bharat is the Sanskrit word for the Indian subcontinent. And this piece was written for a high school band, again in Texas, that had a large Indian American population. And the composer, Brian Valmages, said, well, this is the perfect place to try all these cool sounds I've heard in Bollywood movies my whole life, and all these cool instruments. And so they asked these kids, have you ever seen one? And they said, oh, I've got one at home. My dad plays that. I play that on the side, right? And so all of the kind of what we would consider to be exotic instruments that this score called for are things that these high school kids had access to, and many of them already knew how to play. We didn't already know how to play them, and we didn't have them, so I went and borrowed things and called up band directors and begged, and we actually, one of the things that you'll hear, which is being played by one of our wonderful elementary music teachers, Kevin Rowlett, he's playing, you want to show? This is an electric tambura. A tambura is a string drone instrument. This is, this is an electronic version that MCC English instructor Ted Hazelgrove picked up when he was in India on a Fulbright several years ago. And we've had lots of fun with its electronics and the way things are labeled and stuff. It's very loud. Everybody hates Kevin now. But it's a very cool addition, and I'm glad we're able to have one. We didn't have to just synthesize it, which I'm assuming most other bands do. So this is Homage to Bharat. today. We are going to end with a march, which is a very traditional thing to do. This is a very traditional march, King Cotton by John Philip Sousa. The way we're playing it might not be the way you've played it before. If you've played it before, you're used to hearing it, if you are used to hearing it. What we are doing is the version that was created a few years ago by the United States Marine Band, who is going through and creating definitive versions of all of Sousa's marches and making them available for free, which is very cool. One of the things they have done is they've gone through and tried to figure out what Sousa's band actually did when they performed these marches. A lot of it was just kind of word of mouth, right? They would discuss amongst themselves, oh, we don't play the first time through the trio, or oh, the clarinets lay out so we can hear the oboe, or whatever. And those things weren't written into the score. So what we've ended up with are Sousa marches that all sound very bombastic all the time. And that's fine in a parade, right? But this is sit-down band, and we don't have to be loud all the time, and we can explore the various timbres, the various tone colors of different instruments. We can do cool things with dynamics, right? We can play loud and soft. We can actually do both. It's cool. And so this will maybe take you by surprise if you're familiar with this march, but the best the Marine Band can tell, and they seem pretty smart, this is how Sousa intended it to go when it was done in a concert setting like this. So this is Sousa's King Cotton. Thank you again for coming out tonight.